What I'm going to do is to talk a little bit about three areas that you should look at in terms of how you approach data analysis within your fraud detection processes or programs. And Paul is going to take it after that and get into a lot more details and examples. But one of the things that we would like to do is just to talk a little bit about, what is the industry standard. If you're using data analysis within your fraud detection program, the thing is that you should be making sure that you're using tools that can look at the entire data population. So one of the challenges that fraud investigators always have is that if you're looking, it's like looking for a needle in a haystack. It's you want to make sure that you have tools that can easily manipulate and go through millions of transactions, millions of records, and be able to give you, that kind of instantaneous response. So as your mind is working and your critical thinking process is happening, you're also being able to get the software or the tool to respond to you in real time. And so there's no data analysis without data. So one of the things that you also want to make sure is that you also want to make sure that it's very easy for you to get data. And accessing data at times can range from very simple to very complicated. It could be a situation where you're just getting data from a data dump. It could be that you're getting from a report. It could be that you're getting from Excel. And other instances, it could be that you're connecting directly to a database and pulling data from there. And so if you're using your tools, you want to make sure that you are not messing with the integrity of the source. So whatever tools you're using, you want to make sure that you can't change the source data. You want to make sure that the source data can be preserved and that it's not taken into question when it is that you're providing your evidence. So you want to make sure that as you connect to the data source, the integrity of that source is protected. So ideally, you want to make sure that you're connecting to it in a read-only manner, and you're not able to go in and change figures that came to you in terms of a data source. You want to make sure that you also have a tool that is able to join and relate data from multiple sources. So if it is that you're looking at potential conflict between employees and vendors, you're getting your vendor information from one location, you're getting your employee information from another location, and in some instances you might be even getting information, say, in terms of the registration of the company, who are the directors, that might be coming from a third source as well. And you have to make sure that you have tools that can pull the data or access the data from these many sources and create these unique insights when you're doing your investigations. And one of the things that a lot of persons will complain about is that when they're trying to get data, IT is not as accommodating as they would like IT to be. So you want to make sure that you're not creating a lot of work for IT, and you want to make sure that you're empowered to get data on your own if possible. So that is in terms of industry standard. There are some other things that you have to look at in terms of the process as well. Even within your own audit process or your investigation process, how does data analytics fit into that? Many times we would like to think that the technology or the software is the centerpiece of everything, but the truth is that you need to have processes where data analysis is factored into your audit process or your investigation process, and there are clear-cut procedures for accessing data, retaining evidence, preserving evidence, and so on. So the process has to be very clear. So one of the things that we always recommend is that we would say, if you're looking at a process, so in this procurement process example that Paul is going to go through, there is a way that you go through and assess where are the key controls in this process, or even within the sub-processes, and how do I then now validate or test those controls to see if they're effective and whether or not I'm being exposed to any fraudulent activity. So you're looking at high-risk areas, and those are the areas that you want to really focus on. You want to be doing your data analysis in a very focused manner. That way, you're getting the greatest return for the level of effort that you're putting into the process. Then you have to assess. Now, in a business process, you would say, what does a fraud look like? What does it look like when I have, I'm going to use the same example again, when I have a vendor, Jane Taylor, that is related to a vendor, and she has the ability to create this fictitious vendor and make payments to that vendor. What does that look like in the data? We know what it looks like in the business process, but how does that translate in the data? And so that's one of the things that you have to do. You have to be able to say, when I'm looking at the business process and I'm looking at the data, this is how the business process represents itself in the data. And that is also going to determine what data you need, what analytics you need to be doing, and how do you interpret those analytics. And one thing that's not listed here, it's also the validation of your results. Most of you who are senior people that have been doing, or you've been a CFE for a long time, you've been an auditor for a long time, one of the things that you know is that when you're using data analysis tools, oftentimes the first time that you go through, you get a high number of exceptions, and then it often means that there's something that you don't know about the business process. And then you go through, refine that, remove the false positives, come back, narrow it down even further until you get something really concrete. So that has to also be a part of that process. So in terms of your people as well, the first thing that I'd say is that you want to make sure that the people that are using the tools, that they are thinking in a critical way. They are exposed to critical thinking. They are thinking on their feet. They are creative in terms of how they look at things. And for example, one of the things that I often find is that persons will say, hey, I'm looking at, and Paul mentioned payroll fraud. Sometimes persons will be doing an audit on payroll and they're looking for excessive payments, but oftentimes you should also be looking for payments that should have been made that was not made. So you're not just always looking at it in one direction. You're just looking for anything that doesn't conform to the norm, anything that is anomalous. So that's one of the things that you have to keep in mind. So the persons who are using the tools have to be thinking that way. So data acquisition, for data acquisition process, talk to IT, align IT in terms of your objectives and making sure that they're also doing the same things so that you're able to get data that is of sufficient quality. When we talk about doing the data analysis, for the first few times that you're using data analysis in your audits or in your investigations, you want to kind of like have a number of people working with you so that you are not the only person that is thinking about it. And the last thing that we like to talk about is once you have done something very successful where you have found significant exceptions, significant fraud within your organization, you want to preserve that. You want to make it repeatable. You want to make sure that you don't have to do the work again from scratch. And that's when we talk about using the right tools to script it so that it becomes repeatable. So technology just kind of sums up all of that, what I talked about before, making sure that you can look at the entire population, you can get the data easily, integrity is preserved, and that way now you can have your enhanced fraud detection capabilities, and that in terms of all the industry standard stuff, evidence being retained, audit trail being provided, all of those things are retained and maintained within the application or whatever technologies is that you're using.